let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking Maulana Maududi's profound commentary on the story of Yusuf, or Yusuf, as he's known in the Quran. And I've got to say, what we're looking at today is absolutely fascinating. This isn't just your standard bedtime story. We're talking about a text that acts as a rigorous historical proof and an unshakable moral compass all at once. If you've ever wondered exactly how ancient history, human psychology, and divine destiny kind of collide, well, you are definitely in the right place.
So here's our roadmap for the explainer. We'll kick things off with the context of the revelation, then map out the geography and the historical era. After that, we'll trace the famous dream and the betrayal, follow Yusuf's enslavement and his ultimate trial of character, and finally, we'll wrap up with this massive clash between divine will and human plots. Let's get into it.
All right, Section 1, Context of the Revelation, a historical test.
You know, this narrative didn't just drop out of nowhere as some random moral fable. It was actually a highly targeted response to a very specific historical challenge. To really grasp the power of this text, we have to ask a foundational question. Why on earth were the Meccan Arabs asking about the Israelites in the first place? Well, according to the source material, the Quraysh, who were the prophet's main adversaries, were prompted by the Jewish tribes of Medina to ask this super specific question just to test Prophet Muhammad. They basically asked, why did the Israelites go to Egypt? Now, this was a brilliant trap. The Arabs of Mecca had literally zero local knowledge of Israelite history. It wasn't in their traditions, it wasn't in their folklore, nothing. The questioners knew this, and they fully expected to catch him off guard and expose him. But spoiler alert, instead of getting trapped, the prophet delivered this incredibly detailed history. The commentary notes that delivering this served two critical objectives at the exact same time. First, it provided undeniable proof of his prophethood by answering the supposedly unanswerable, without even hesitating. And second, and honestly, this is where it gets really deep, it served as a stark, underlying warning to the Quraysh. The text is essentially telling them, look, just as Yusuf's brothers plotted against him and utterly failed to stop God's plan, your plotting against this prophet is going to fail too. And one day, you'll stand before him and surrender, just like those brothers stood before Yusuf. Okay, moving on to Section 2. Geography and historical era, grounding the text. Now, what is truly fascinating here is how the source grounds the scriptural narrative in actual, verifiable ancient history. Just look at the distinct titles used for the rulers of Egypt. The Quran deliberately uses the word king for the ruler during Yusuf's time, but then switches to Pharaoh for the ruler during Moses' time. For centuries, critics actually thought this was a mistake, but modern historical and archaeological discoveries, which the commentary highlights, reveal that during Yusuf's time, Egypt was ruled by the Hyksos dynasty. These were foreign rulers of Arab and Semitic descent. They weren't native Egyptians, and they didn't even use the title pharaoh. This brilliantly explains why an Israelite like Yusuf could rise to the highest levels of government. He and the Hyksos kings shared similar Semitic roots. It wasn't until native Egyptian rule was restored much later, during the time of the pharaohs, that the Israelites were stripped of their power and enslaved. The historical precision here is just stunning. And when you map out the actual geography involved, you really get a sense of the incredible, grueling journey Yusuf was forced to take. Imagine being dragged from your home in Hebron, navigating through harsh, unforgiving desert routes, all the way into the heart of the Egyptian capital, Memphis. This was not a quick trip. It was a total, devastating dislocation from everything he knew and loved, crossing ancient national boundaries entirely as a captive.
Section 3, The Dream and Betrayal, the Seed of Jealousy. With the historical stage perfectly set, the human drama really kicks into gear with an inciting incident, a prophetic dream. Talk about a roller coaster. Just look at how quickly the trials compound in Yusuf's life. On day 1, he has this beautiful, profound vision of stars, the sun and the moon bowing to him, which is a clear sign of a massive divine destiny. But within days, his life is violently overturned by his own family's jealousy. His brothers, threatened by their father's love for him, literally throw him into a dark, dry well and leave him for dead. Shortly after, a passing caravan discovers him, pulls him up, and enslaves him. He's dragged off to Egypt and bought by a high-ranking official named Al-Aziz. I mean, the whiplash of his reality changing is incredibly severe.
Which brings us to Section 4, Enslavement in Egypt. From beloved son to merchandise. The commentary places a heavy emphasis on the sheer degradation Yusuf faced here. The source specifically highlights that when the caravan pulled him from the well, his brothers, who were actually watching nearby, actively denied knowing him and sold him off for just a few paltry dirhams. Think about the psychological weight of that for a second. The text uses this detail to underscore a profound irony. It shows just how little value human plotting placed on someone who was literally destined for absolute greatness. To his brothers, he was a nuisance. To the caravan, he was cheap merchandise. But to the divine plan, he was the future savior of an entire nation.
Section 5. The Trial of Character, the House of Al-Aziz.
So as Yusuf grows into a strikingly handsome young man in the care of Al-Aziz, his physical safety is finally secured. But it's immediately replaced by a massive moral and psychological test. The wife of Al-Aziz becomes deeply infatuated with Yusuf. She locks the doors and attempts to seduce him. And when he's cornered, the text highlights his principled, unwavering response. He cries out, "God forbid, my Lord has given me a good abode. The wrongdoers never prosper." This demonstrates moral fortitude that is just extraordinary. Despite his immense vulnerability as a slave in a foreign land, he absolutely refuses to betray his master's trust. And more importantly, he refuses to compromise his devotion to God. The crucial point is what happens next. It's almost like an ancient crime scene investigation. Yusuf runs for the door, she chases him, tearing his shirt, and they run right smack into her husband, Al-Aziz. Instantly, the wife flips the narrative and falsely accuses Yusuf of assault. But the commentary details this brilliant logic used by a wise witness in the household to settle the dispute. The witness says, "Look at his shirt. If it's torn from the front, she's telling the truth, and he attacked her. But if it's torn from the back, she's lying, and he was fleeing." And sure enough, the physical evidence of the shirt being torn from behind completely exonerated Yusuf and exposed the wife's aggression beyond a shadow of a doubt.
However, in ancient high society, secrets rarely stay secret. Gossip spreads like wildfire, right? The noble women of the city begin whispering, mocking the Aziz wife for losing her mind over a slave. So, to silence her critics, she orchestrates this highly dramatic, almost theatrical scene. She invites these noble women to a banquet, hands them fruit and sharp knives, and then commands Yusuf to walk out before them. The text describes how the women of the city were so entirely blinded by his striking presence that they completely lost their senses, accidentally cutting their own hands with the knives. They were so awestruck they practically shouted that he couldn't possibly be a mortal man, but must be a noble angel. Emboldened by this, the Aziz's wife essentially tells them, "See, now you get it." She then publicly threatens Yusuf with prison if he doesn't yield to her demands. Faced with this continuous, overwhelming harassment, the commentary highlights Yusuf's incredible response. He prays, saying, "My Lord, the prison is dearer to me than that to which they invite me." Think about that. He makes a deliberate, conscious choice, preferring the darkness and harshness of a dungeon over succumbing to moral corruption.
All right, our final section, Section 6, Divine Will vs. Human Plots, the overarching theme. Everything we've covered leads to this exact point. The ultimate philosophical takeaway that the source material drives home is this deeply powerful paradox. Human schemes simply cannot defeat divine purpose. In fact, those who plot against God's plan ironically end up facilitating the whole shebang. Seriously, think about it. The brothers casting him into a well, that was exactly what was needed to get him into Egypt. The wife's plot to throw him in prison, that was exactly what was needed to put him in proximity to the king's servants, which eventually leads to him saving the entire region from famine. The commentary makes it explicitly clear that this same dynamic applied to the Quraysh trying to trap Prophet Muhammad. Their human plotting was merely paving the very road to God's intended success. Which leaves us with a profound thought to carry forward. When human malice or plotting seems to succeed in our world, when the wrongdoers seem to have the upper hand, is it merely setting the stage for a greater, unseen plan? I'll leave you to ponder that overarching dynamic in human history, because as this explainer clearly shows, the ultimate victory always, always belongs to the unseen plan. Thanks so much for joining me. Keep questioning and keep learning.